This happened about 4 years ago. I am now 21 years old, and I don't live in that neighborhood anymore. Yesterday, while visiting my parents' house, I ran into my old neighbor, and the memory of the incident came back to me. Let me tell you a story. I live in a third-world country, and our area is considered one of the poorest, but only in the eyes of outsiders. Nevertheless, we are social and we support each other. Even people who have been in prison before are usually friendly. Many people with mental problems live in our neighborhood, and Happy is one of them. The literal translation of his name is Happy, so my mom and I nicknamed him Happy. I always hear him jokingly say that he is a good person. He always has a smile on his face. I have lived in this house for almost 19 years, so Happy has been very close to me. He lives with his 2 younger brothers, one of whom makes a living as a fruit vendor, and the other as a taxi driver. Happy does not have a stable job because of his mental disorder, which I suspect is a subtype of schizophrenia, but I don't know exactly. All I know is that his mental state is not normal, so it is impossible to have a normal conversation with him about sports, news, etc. His statements don't make any sense. Also, mental health problems are neglected in our country, and there are only 3 specialized institutions in the country for such people. That's why Happy doesn't get adequate medical care, and people call him crazy. This is really very sad. My father used to be close to Happy and his siblings, but now he doesn't even socialize with them. My father used to help Happy by giving him money to buy cigarettes. He knew that Happy's brother, who was a taxi driver, had to take care of 2 children in another town, and his other brother, who was a greengrocer, didn't earn much. Happy would sometimes help carry groceries, and my father would often give him money as a token of his gratitude. So from my childhood, I only remember him as a very kind and friendly person. My father used to be close to Happy and his siblings, but now he doesn't even socialize with them. My father used to help Happy by giving him money to buy cigarettes. He knew that Happy's brother, who was a taxi driver, had to take care of 2 children in another town, and his other brother, who was a greengrocer, didn't earn much. Happy would sometimes help carry groceries, and my father would often give him money as a token of his gratitude. So from my childhood, I only remember him as a very kind and friendly person. I wonder how much time he spent walking. Some people were worried when they saw him, but most of the time he just stood there smoking a cigarette. But eventually his demeanor changed. He started looking at me with a confused and fearful smile on his face. Whenever I passed by, he would continue this stare without turning around. Sometimes he would step back and lean against the wall as if to hide himself. He started to get angry more often, shouting something in anger and sneaking away in the direction of the house. Now I will tell you what actually happened to me. As I mentioned above, he never took his eyes off me. I was 17 years old that day, and I was alone at home. My relatives were out, and he must have known that I was alone, because after they left, I saw him standing in his usual place, watching them leave. During lunch, I decided to go grocery shopping. At that time, he was standing next to his brother, who was selling fruit at the local market. I went to the market to buy some vegetables and meat. The vegetables were not far from the Happy house, and the butcher was a minute's walk away. As I paid the bill and put the meat in my bag, I looked up and saw him looking at me. I didn't hesitate to turn right to go home, but he was behind me again. Our houses were next to each other, so I didn't pay much attention. I thought he would stop when I passed his house, but he didn't. When I turned around, his scary smile continued to follow me. I didn't take his behavior seriously and assumed he went to his usual place to smoke a cigarette. I didn't think he was the kind of person who would be a danger to the neighborhood. I stepped out of the alley, went through the front door, and into a wide hallway. I turned right and went up the stairs to the 2nd floor where my apartment was. Suddenly, I heard someone coming through the front door. The footsteps were quick and seemed to be in a hurry to get somewhere. I turned around to look at the bottom of the stairs and give way for them to come up quickly. But to my surprise, I saw Happy at the bottom of the stairs. I froze, my heart racing. I asked him what he was doing here, but he silently ran toward me, taking 2 steps at a time. I tried to go faster, but he grabbed my legs and I slipped and fell. When I fell, I hit my right arm and leg really hard. He dragged me down the stairs and I hurt my back, but adrenaline overwhelmed me and I started kicking his legs, trying to free myself from his grip and screaming for him to let me go. I was also screaming for help, hoping the neighbors would hear me and come to my aid. With my free foot, I kicked him in the forearm, hoping he would let me go. I kept punching and swinging my other leg. Finally, I managed to free myself and started running up the stairs, but because of his sore leg, he suddenly started to catch up with me. I tried to kick him, hoping that he would lose his balance and fall down the stairs so that I could get into the house. I kicked and screamed, but nothing helped. It seemed like a long time had passed, but as my neighbor's door suddenly started to open, Happy immediately ran away. A neighbor helped me to her apartment. Blood was dripping from my elbow, and all I could do was scream in fear and pain. She helped me stop the bleeding. I told her I could do it myself, but she insisted and kept looking for medicine. Eventually, I chased my fear away, climbed the stairs, and went to my apartment. And after about an hour, I pulled myself together, calmed down a bit, and walked cautiously to the old woman's house. I knocked on the door and she opened it for me. I asked her not to tell anyone what had happened, because if my father found out the truth, he might punish Happy a lot. I told her that there was something wrong in Happy Head, and that I didn't want my father to send him to jail because of his underdevelopment. She promised not to tell my parents, and that was the end of it. Over the next 2 years, Happy changed again, but this time he wouldn't even look me in the eye. When I met him on the street, he deliberately turned his back and walked the other way. For the first few months, I was afraid he was waiting for me around the corner or somewhere, but eventually he ran away from me and became inconspicuous. After I moved out, he continued to avoid seeing me. 4 years have passed and he still won't look in my direction. My only hope is that Happy stays calm and doesn't hurt other people around him. And most importantly, I want people to recognize mental illness and get the treatment and help they need. People like Happy really need that. I am a 28-year-old young professional, living alone in an apartment in the city. I travel a lot for work and enjoy the quiet space when I come home. So last year, after a 2-week business trip, I returned to a cozy city apartment. My room was familiar and cozy. It only had 1.5 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. There was enough space in each room to give me a feeling of peace and comfort. As I was putting my clothes away, I felt the blanket in the corner move. At first, I ignored it, convincing myself that it was probably my imagination or a draft. At this point, my logic and reason guided me. It made me realize that there must be a logical explanation for this movement. Perhaps it was a play of light or shadow. Finally, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate further. Back in the bedroom, I focused on the blanket. It seemed motionless, but the movement I had seen earlier was still present in my mind. Now the disturbing stillness of the blanket was a test of my nerves and courage. The blanket did not move, but the memory of the earlier movement haunted me. What the hell was that? As I continued to stare at the blanket, the silence was broken by footsteps coming from the bedroom. My heart raced, and I ran to the bathroom, drenched in cold sweat. The footsteps stopped just outside, and I locked the door just in time. The doorknob clanged, quietly at first, then more violently. I was trapped, and my breathing became short and shallow. The sound of footsteps and knockers created a cacophony of fear in the silent apartment. Then the intruder started knocking on the door. I was too frightened to move or speak. There were muffled voices coming from the other side, but I could not make out any words as the knocking continued, as if the person had a mental problem. The knocks were neither loud nor fast, but the constant rhythm increased the fear. Eventually, the knocking stopped. The footsteps became distant, and there was the sound of a door slamming. I gathered my courage and left the bathroom. I immediately locked the front door of the apartment and started to search all the rooms to make sure that whoever or whatever was responsible for the footsteps had left. It was only when I was checking the first room that I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned around and came face to face with the intruder. a pale-eyed woman in her early 30s. She attacked me without warning. Fortunately, she was unarmed. I grabbed her hand and pulled her down, and that's when I recognized her. I met her through Tinder a year ago, but after a few dates, I realized she was mentally unstable and ended the relationship without explanation. She became violent and stalked me relentlessly. I blocked all contact and didn't see or hear from him for 8 months. I took her out of the house and immediately called the police, told them what had happened, and gave his personal details. The police arrived immediately, but found no evidence that anyone had broken into my house or lived in it. The apartment was very clean, just as it had been when I left. I decided to sue him, and the court granted a restraining order, prohibiting him from having any contact with me. I have not seen or heard from him since. These events taught me the importance of being vigilant even in my own home. I learned to trust my instincts more and to be prepared for the unexpected.